Hello Dota fans and welcome to Breakdown. I'm your host Bonsai and today we'll be taking a look at Newbee. Ever since winning TI4, Newbee has gone through many roster iterations trying to return to their former glory. In 2016, Newbee went toe-to-toe with top teams, placing third at the Manila Major. Expectations around Newbee were high going into TI6, but were not met with the Chinese squad finishing in the bottom 8. In the post-TI roster shuffle, only KP and Kaka remained, with veterans Hao, Mu, and Chuan leaving the roster, with less experienced players U9 and SCCC taking the 1 and 2 positions. Newbee did manage to add a veteran presence, with Faith joining to take the 4 position. I brought in Standard Deviants analyst Kyle to take a look at the new team and see what he thinks. How's it going, Kyle?
Hi. I also go by Malachamavet online. I can spell it at the end. So I wanted to talk about Newbee because I think they're a really interesting team looking forward. So they lost Hao, Mu, and Chuan. This is the first time the team hasn't had Mu since their inception. Hao has joined and left and joined again. They added U9, SCC, and Faith. So the team that started as basically a veteran superstar lineup with Sansheng and Zhao 8 and Hao and Mu being very well-known players, and now they're basically Faith plus 4 new players to a certain degree. So the aim of the team, or like the soul of the team, has changed, I think, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's interesting to note. KP stayed, which I think is of note because I think it means that he has belief in the squad, because as he mentioned in one of his interviews, he doesn't speak very well with the team. Like, the communication's a little off, and I'm sure that he had offers from other teams. So the fact that he stayed in China and stayed on Newbee, I think, speaks to him being confident. I know that Kaka was a really strong player on eHome just before this. He's been really good in general throughout the last little while. He seems really interested in captaining, based on the fact that one of the reasons I believe he left eHome was because Lanham was like the captain and he couldn't step up. I think he stayed with Newbee because he wanted to continue in that role. He's really good and really flexible. He also is basically one of the top IO players in the world, and it's very rare in China. So the fact that IO is something they can bring to the table as a player, I think, is really good. U9 is easily the most standout player from the Tongfu squad after TI3, the more recent ones. And Faith actually joined him for a while, so they both are leaving Tongfu together. His pool is actually pretty diverse for a carry player right now. He for example, recently he pulled a official games of 9 and 6 with Gyrocopter, known bad hero. So I think that's of note. SCCC is one of the 2 9K players, the other one joining LGD, AME. And he's been easily the best player on Newbee Young since he started, and easily been consistently the best player. And I think I was actually surprised that he didn't get picked up earlier by a higher tier team. So I'm glad that he's getting a chance here. He generally plays more greedy mids, like Naga, Invoker, Alchemist, stuff like that. But I think that he's been playing a little bit more Space Makers on his pub record and stuff. I think he's trying to be more flexible on the team. And also, one of the things is that he plays a really good carry Naga, which means that unlike in the previous iteration of Newbee, where you would have KP move to the 1 position when they pick Naga, because he's a really good Naga player, but also the offlaner, now they can have consistent roles, because they have someone that can play it from the 1 position. And then Faith, which is interesting, because he won TI2, and he goes all the way back to Dota 1, because he played on Tyloo for them. But he hasn't really done anything this year, although before then he was pretty consistent. He made it to all the TIs except for this last year. And he has a lot of experience that some of the other players don't have. Like U9 and SCCC haven't really played any international lands, so I think that brings an important level of experience.
All right, so what do you think is something for fans to look forward to in this event? What do you think is really good about this team? You went through specific about their roster, but the team as a whole, what do you really like about them?
What fans can look forward to, on paper the team is really strong. Although if you look at like the previous iteration, that also looked really strong on paper, and then at TI kind of fell through. I've personally been watching U9 and SCCC for like over a year at this point. I think they've been really good and really consistently good, so I'm really excited to see that. And I actually think it's interesting to note. So they have a lot of flexibility on all of their roles. Probably some of the most flexible players outside of wings right now. And as an example, SCCC got to 9K and one of the few 9K players, but he played 54% of those games in ranked in the last year. Or sorry, in RD instead of AP. There's a big push for a lot of pros to play random draft, which is one of the reasons that people say that wings was so flexible. So I think it'll be interesting to see if they bring that sort of flexibility to, that people saw in wings to the new newbie roster.
So what would you say is worrying for this team going into MDL? Is there something in particular you see as a big problem for them, or just a few things?
They have looked a little shaky recently. They lost to IGV in a qualifier series recently, 2-0. But IGV also went through Tongfu and CDEC and VGJ. So they're looking really strong too. So it's not easiest to judge. But because you have 3 players coming in, and there's 2 pairs of players from 2 different teams, there's a lot of adjusting to the system and figuring out what works. So there's going to be growing pains regardless of how good they wind up being. And of course, I said earlier, KP's mentioned there's some communication issues, which could also continue to be a problem because losing Chuan is losing another a person that speaks fluent English. So instead of it being one other person that can speak English, it's now none, at least to a certain degree. So I mean, I think that's a big part of it. Is if they're managed to find a harmony, if they manage to gel right, I think they have a ton of potential. I think that they could be really good. And one of the advantages to have that growing period is the fact that if you look in the upcoming however many months between now and the major, there's a lot of Chinese qualifiers, Chinese online events in general, Chinese LANs. There's a lot of space to play officials and build that teamwork, build that experience, build that ability to kind of become a good team. And then I think they basically what happened in the roster shuffle is Newbee lost some of the most experienced players, but they gained some of the most high potential players. So I think I think it could pay off in the long run because these are players that in my mind haven't even peaked yet. Even Kaka, who's also considered one of the highest MMR players, has a huge hero pool. A lot of these players in the right situation could become even better than where they are now.
What would you say is their challenge for this tournament, though? If they have a very long-term potential, would you say that there's, kind of this might be a rough tournament for them because they might not have it all together yet?
So I would say that, except for the fact that I think that a lot of teams right now, I mean, IGV didn't really shuffle very much, and so them performing well now seems to make a lot of sense. But if you look at, all the European teams, right? Evil Geniuses, OG, Secret, those all had pretty significant changes. LGDFY, Forever Young, has a bunch of really good players, but again, a lot of them haven't, been together for recently, except for Zhao and Yao, who have one of the biggest bromances in Chinese Dota. Vici had a bit of a shakeup, and they have a new player that, Ghost, even I, who follow a lot of Tier 2 Chinese Dota, I don't remember any stand-up performances from him, although he's one of the top MMR players, and so I think obviously he's good. If you look at the group that Newbee's in with Secret, FY, and Phoenix, I think that FY's Forever Young is probably more likely to take first, but I think that Newbee are pretty strong for contention for second place. I think if they perform as well as you can hope for given their newness, I think that they'll take second but in the upper bracket. I think that the other bracket has a lot more uncertainty around their teams, like EG, OG, Vici, so I think that we have a better idea of that than Forever Young and Phoenix that have actually played games since then. Obviously not many, but...
And so would you say for this event, the X factor, the thing that they're going to really depend on, that if it goes well, they're going to do well, and if it doesn't, they're behind the 8 ball, would you say that that's sort of their ability to quickly come together as a team and see if they can just, get that synergy quicker than everybody else in this event?
I mean, I think that to a degree. I mean, I think they've already been showing it. Like they lost, as I said, they lost to IGV, but IGV's has a lot more history of being together, and so as compared to Newbie, the fact that they went through other teams to get there, so even though IGV beat them, they're already whatever the third best teams in those qualifiers, right, or the second best team in those qualifiers. So if that trajectory continues, even if that's the case, that they haven't fully gelled, they're still looking better than like all the European teams that haven't even played officials yet with their new rosters.
All right. So is there anything else that we haven't quite covered yet? Any interesting notes you maybe want to give us on Newbie here?
I think what's interesting is I think they actually have the highest MMR of any team right now, if I recall correctly, because they're all, like, with the exception of Faith, I think they're all high 8K or 9K. So, I mean, if we judge it based on that, clearly it's the team that has to win because MMR wins games. But I think I don't know. I think this whole tournament is actually going to be interesting because there's so many. As I said, like even the teams that have played some games, there's been so few of them. This is going to be the first chance to really see where the teams are in their current state, even if those states are not fully together. I think it can give us interesting hints to see where these teams will wind up. I think, if they work together perfectly, I think Newbie could come together and be an incredibly contentious team for the next major.
All right. So if you want to find Kyle, his social media is going to be down below, and you can find him there. Is there any other way to contact you?
Twitter is generally the better place. I'm on Discord too. You can find me in Center Deviants or a bunch of random ones, but that's the one that's generally easy to find. But mostly just on Twitter. And I'm pretty responsive and I check it a bunch.
All right. Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks.
Thanks again to Kyle for coming on this episode of Breakdown. Let's take a quick look at what we just went through. Newbie's roster is filled with potential, as well as an experienced player in Faith. The team is incredibly talented on paper and has incredibly flexible hero pools. However, Newbie will need to get through their recent growing pains quickly, establish effective communication, and deal with their loss of experienced players to do well here. The X factor for them will be whether or not they can harness their massive potential in time to do well at MDL. I polled the analysts who've joined me and a couple who couldn't to see what they thought. Remember that these predictions are with very limited data, so they should be taken with a grain of that salt all Dota players carry with them. Newbie had one of the more varied placements among our analysts, with Kyle and Knoxville valuing them highly, with the rest, not so much. Their median placement is 7th, 8th, so very bottom of the tournament, but they certainly could outperform that, and as Knoxville put them first, I think they definitely have the potential to do that. Can Newbie get their team together in time? Tune into MDL to find out. I'm Bonsai, and thanks for watching Breakdown. Let me know if you agree or disagree with our analysts with a comment here or on Twitter. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and subscribe. If you have any feedback for the show, you can comment here, tweet, or email me. Huge thanks to my partner Jonas, who created our graphics and helped produce this show. You can find his social media here as well. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time.